2 SEALs tried to beat her, she shocked 282 Navy SEALs in seconds.
The air was thick with salt and tension. Under the blazing California sun, 282 of the toughest warriors in the world stood watching. These were men who had survived Hell Week, men who had pushed past broken bones, hypothermia, and exhaustion. United States Navy SEALs. And today, they were laughing. Because in the center of the training yard, a young woman had just been double-kicked to the ground. It happened in a flash. 2 massive trainees moved at once, a coordinated strike meant to embarrass her, to test her, to prove she didn't belong. Their boots slammed into her midsection and shoulder, and she hit the concrete hard. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads. Some smirked. Most assumed it was over. She wasn't supposed to be there anyway. For weeks, whispers had followed her across the compound. She won't last. She's out of her league. This isn't for her. The training demonstration wasn't part of official SEAL qualification. It was a high-intensity combat exhibition, hand-to-hand drills designed to test reaction, adaptability, and composure under humiliation. And humiliation was exactly what they expected her to feel. She lay still for half a second, just half, long enough for the crowd to decide the outcome. But what they didn't see was her smile. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. The instructors on the sidelines noticed it first. Their expressions changed, just slightly. They had seen that look before. It was the same look worn by operators seconds before flipping a losing fight into a legendary moment. The 2 trainees stepped forward, confident. They thought the job was finished. They were wrong, because this wasn't about strength. This wasn't about size, and it definitely wasn't about ego. It was about discipline. Years before this moment, long before the crowd, before the whispers, before the doubters, she had trained in silence. Early mornings, late nights, bruised ribs, split lips, endless repetition. While others trained for applause, she trained for inevitability. The sun reflected off the concrete as she slowly planted her palm against the ground. And then she rose, not in anger, not in desperation, but with the calm of someone who had already seen the ending. The laughter stopped. The yard grew quiet. 282 Navy SEALs suddenly weren't watching a demonstration anymore. They were witnessing a lesson. And in the next 3 seconds, everything would change. The yard was silent. Not the casual silence of boredom, the heavy silence of realization. She stood, balanced, steady, breathing controlled. Dust clung to her shoulder where she had hit the ground, but her eyes were clear, focused. The 2 trainees exchanged a quick glance. They had expected hesitation. They had expected embarrassment. Instead, they saw something far more dangerous: composure. One of them lunged first, fast, aggressive, confident in his size. He aimed to finish it quickly, to reassert control in front of the watching crowd. He never completed the move. She pivoted left, not backward, stepping inside his reach. Her forearm redirected his momentum while her heels snapped sharply into the side of his knee. A precise strike, not wild, not emotional, calculated. The sound echoed across the concrete. Before he could recover, she rotated with fluid efficiency and drove an elbow cleanly into his jawline. He dropped. Not dramatically, just collapsed. A ripple shot through the 282 watching SEALs. No cheering, no shouting, just stunned disbelief. The second trainee reacted instantly, charging with raw power. He swung wide, aiming to overwhelm her with force. But force without control is predictable. She ducked under the swing, stepped past his center line, and trapped his arm with mechanical precision. In one seamless motion, she shifted her weight and executed a sweeping takedown that ripped his balance from beneath him. He hit the ground hard. Before he could roll or recover, she transitioned, knee to chest, forearm to throat, controlling space and air with disciplined restraint. 3 seconds. That's all it took.
from the moment she rose to the moment both men lay pinned to the concrete. The yard was frozen. 282 battle-hardened Navy SEALs, men trained to operate in chaos, stood motionless, because what they had just witnessed wasn't luck, it wasn't speed alone, it was mastery. On the sidelines, one of the senior instructors slowly removed his sunglasses. He had seen elite fighters before, he had trained warriors for years, but this was different. She wasn't fighting to prove something, she wasn't fighting for applause, she was fighting with inevitability, like the outcome had never been in doubt. She released both trainees calmly and stepped back. No celebration, no glare, just a quiet reset of her stance. The two men slowly stood, shaken more in pride than in body. The whispers from weeks ago had vanished, replaced by something heavier: respect. But the demonstration wasn't over because the instructors weren't testing her ability to fight two opponents. They were testing something far deeper, and what they were about to announce next would push this moment from impressive to unforgettable.
For a moment, no one moved. The two trainees stepped back into formation, faces tight, pride bruised but discipline intact. Across the yard, 282 Navy SEALs stood in stunned silence. Then, the senior instructor stepped forward. His boots echoed against the concrete. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He simply studied her. "Again," he said calmly. A ripple passed through the formation. Again? The two trainees who had just been dropped were dismissed with a sharp gesture. In their place, 4 new operators stepped forward. Bigger, faster, more experienced. These weren't trainees seeking attention. These were proven men, combat-tested, mission-ready. The message was clear. What just happened wasn't enough. She adjusted her gloves slowly, eyes scanning the new circle forming around her. 4 opponents, tight spacing, no wasted movement. They weren't here to underestimate her. They were here to close the lesson. The instructor raised his hand and dropped it. The first attack came from behind. A mistake. She spun low, using the momentum of the incoming grab to pull the attacker forward. A sharp hip shift, a clean throw, and he flipped over her shoulder, crashing onto his back. Before he even hit the ground fully, the second operator rushed from the right. She stepped into him instead of retreating, absorbing the impact, redirecting his force downward with a tight arm drag that sent him stumbling face first onto the concrete. 2 down, but the remaining 2 adjusted instantly. No reckless charges, no ego. They circled, communicating without words. This was different now. This was strategy. One feinted high while the other aimed low, a coordinated split-level attack designed to break structure. For the first time, she was forced backward, boots scraping, breathing heavier. The crowd leaned forward. This was the breaking point. But pressure reveals truth. As the low strike came in, she shifted her weight just enough, not to avoid it completely, but to bait it. The high attacker committed too early, and in that fraction of a second, she moved. A sharp upward knee intercepted the lower attacker's momentum. Simultaneously, her forearms snapped backward into the chest of the second, disrupting his balance. She stepped through the narrow gap between them, not trapped, but flowing. Then came the final sequence, a spinning back kick that folded one operator at the waist, a sweep that removed the other's base entirely. 4 men, 4 seconds, 4 impacts against concrete. The yard didn't erupt, it didn't cheer, it stood in awe. Because this was no longer about gender, no longer about proving a point. This was about skill at its purest form. She stood alone again in the center, breathing controlled, posture steady. And for the first time that day, no one was whispering. But the instructor still wasn't finished. He stepped forward once more, eyes locked on her. This, he said quietly, was only the warm-up. And what he signaled next would turn this demonstration into a moment the entire base would remember
for years.
The yard had never been this quiet. Not during Hell Week, not during graduation, not even during combat briefings. 282 Navy SEALs stood locked in place, eyes fixed on the center. She stood there alone, calm, focused, waiting. The senior instructor stepped closer, his voice low but carrying across the concrete. "This final test," he said, "is not about fighting." A pause. "It's about leadership." The formation shifted slightly. From the far end of the yard, 6 SEAL candidates were brought forward, not the strongest, not the fastest, but exhausted, fresh off a brutal endurance drill, sweat-soaked, breathing hard, muscles trembling. They were handed weighted sandbags and given a simple instruction: complete a timed tactical obstacle circuit. But there was one condition: she would lead them. No demonstration, no solo fight, no spotlight, just responsibility. The whistle blew, and chaos began. The first obstacle, a wall climb under load. 2 candidates struggled instantly, arms shaking from earlier drills. The clock ticked loudly in everyone's mind. She didn't shout, she didn't command, she moved. Dropping her own sandbag for a split second, she positioned herself beneath the wall, bracing her stance. One by one, she boosted them upward, sacrificing her own time to stabilize theirs. Next came the crawl pit, low, tight, suffocating. One candidate hesitated, fatigue clouding his focus. She crawled back toward him, met his eyes. One firm nod. No words. He moved. The third station required synchronized carry, 4 operators lifting a heavy beam across uneven terrain. Coordination was breaking down. Tempo was off. She adjusted their grip positions mid-stride, shortened their step pattern, matched breathing rhythm. Within seconds, they moved like a unit, not 6 individuals, one team. The 282 SEALs watching began to notice something different now. This wasn't dominance. This wasn't physical superiority. This was control under pressure. At the final stretch, one candidate collapsed to a knee, cramping, drained. The clock was nearly expired. Without hesitation, she lifted his sandbag onto her own shoulders. The team protested. She shook her head and kept moving. Every step looked heavier now. Sweat streaked across her face, dust clung to her arms, but she didn't slow down. She set the pace. They crossed the finish line together, 1 second before the buzzer. The yard remained silent. Then the senior instructor stepped forward again. For the first time that day, he nodded. "Strength gets attention," he said evenly. "Skill earns respect, but leadership earns loyalty." He turned toward the formation of 282 Navy SEALs. "What you witnessed today wasn't about proving she belongs." Another pause. "It was about proving excellence doesn't ask for permission." The weight of that statement settled across the yard. The 2 trainees who had double-kicked her earlier stood straighter now, not defensive, not embarrassed, changed. Because in seconds, she had dropped them. In minutes, she had outperformed them. But in leadership, she had elevated everyone. No applause followed. Navy SEALs don't erupt in cheers. Instead, something far more powerful happened. One by one, they nodded. Subtle, silent, but absolute. Respect had been earned, not demanded. She picked up her sandbag again and walked back into formation. No spotlight, no speech. Just another warrior among warriors. But everyone there knew. They had just witnessed a moment that would be retold long after the dust settled, a reminder that doubt is loud, but discipline is louder. And sometimes, the one they underestimate most becomes the one they never forget.